SS Staff Sgt. Rochus Misch has passed away. Just died today. He was 96 years old. Who was he? It was Hitler's homie. He was his bodyguard. He was an SS Staff Sergeant, obviously, and his job was one of the two guys who was supposed to be basically a bodyguard and a personal assistant to Hitler. He answered his calls. He was the person who would talk to foreign dignitaries. He even got flowers to send to a person who Hitler admired, an artist that he admired. So, fascinating guy. And back in 2005, he had done an interview with the Associated Press to tell us his insight into Hitler, a man that he had great affection for all the way to the end of his life. And so he was not reformed in that sense or anything along those lines. He was a Nazi. He was an SS soldier, and he was Hitler's bodyguard. And he said, that was a guy I would affectionately call boss, referring to Hitler. And he says, quote, he was no brute, he was no monster, he was no Superman. No, he was just an average dude. If Hitler's not a brute, I'm not sure you're using the word correctly, okay? He went on to say, here's Hitler, my boss, Eva, a friend of Eva, very normal, not like what is written. Now, he's referring to what was happening in Hitler's bunker at the end. We'll get more into that in a second. Eva Braun, of course, was Hitler's mistress, who he wound up marrying in that bunker right before they killed themselves. But to him, he's like, well, you know, you kill 6 million Jews, 13 million people overall, and that's just the concentration camps. We're not even counting the war where tens of millions of people died. Very normal, very normal. He was good to me. In fact, he says, quote, he was a wonderful boss. I lived with him for 5 years. We were the closest people who worked with him. We were always there. Hitler was never without us day and night. And then he goes on to tell a fun little story about a dog that had come into the compound one day, and he says, this small black dog comes running and gets onto the fence, and Hitler said, my God, what is this? Racial mixing? In the beginning, I thought it was going to be like a cute story. Oh, no, it's Hitler loves dogs, too. He's like, oh, no, 999, that is a black dog. It is racial mixing. No, but he's not a monster. If Hitler's not a monster, isn't that amazing? The reason I'm fascinated by this story is, on a personal level, everybody says, well, look, he liked Eva, he liked me, we got along, you know, he liked some artists, he was a good guy, he was a good boss. Whenever you hear people say that about guys who do terrible things, remember this Rochus Misch guy and how he thought, well, Hitler was nice to me. All right, how about the giant concentration camps and the killing of all the Jews, the gypsies, the gays, etc.? He says, quote, that was never a topic. Never. Well, yeah, I imagine so. It's easy to say in hindsight. Of course, by the way, he also doesn't want to accept any responsibility for that. Nah, the concentration camps, what do I know about that? But what's interesting is, he then later said in the interview that he had a friend who was what he called a real lefty, okay? And he says he remembers him being thrown into a concentration camp outside Berlin, and he laughed about it. It's like, what a lefty. And I said, well, of course, that guy we put into the concentration camp. Now, on the other hand, he almost came to tears once during the interview. When was it? When he was describing the fate of Joseph Goebbels, the chief propagandist for the Nazi regime. Now, look, Goebbels was a terrible, terrible guy. I understand he knew Goebbels. And what Goebbels did at the end was they killed their 6 kids and his wife and himself. So I guess if you were buddies with that dude, that would have broken you up. But you would think that a friend, even if he was a real lefty, going to a concentration camp might also be something that might move you to tears instead of laughing about it in hindsight. And he says, in fact, that he didn't sign up for Hitler. He said, I signed up in the war against Bolshevism, not for Adolf Hitler. And he keeps talking about how the left was going to, you know, cause trouble, and they had to put down the left. That's why they had to do all these things. And God, I got to chill down my spine as I was listening to that. Because here's a guy who just laughs off the concentration camps and thinks, well, I mean, we had lefties, we had enemies of the state, we had to do something. Ooh, that's absolutely chilling. And then finally, of course, he described how Hitler killed himself in the bunker, and he's very, very clear about it. Eva Braun poisoned herself, and then Hitler shot himself, and they actually took out his body and burned him, and he saw it with his own eyes. And so whatever happened to this Hitler's bodyguard? I mean, he's probably still in jail, right? I mean, here's a guy who worked for Hitler, didn't denounce him, liked him, laughs about the concentration camps. Yeah, and the Soviets captured him. They let him out back in 1954. Now look, he served 9 years in the Soviet Union, okay? But he was at home comfortably. He lived in Berlin since 1954. Hunky-dory. I mean, if we had a guy who said he was friends and the bodyguard of bin Laden, and he had all this information about bin Laden, do you think that dude would ever see the light of day? This guy was a Nazi. I mean, in the very core of the Nazi group he was in Hitler's bunker. He was literally now the last man left alive in that bunker, and of course now he just passed away. And he was free to go and out and about for over 50 years. Now, what are we looking at? Almost 60 years he lived comfortably in Berlin. Isn't that amazing? All right, by the way, one last thing. He still, before he passed away, would respond to quote-unquote fans and send pictures of himself in his SS outfit outside of Hitler's compound, not the bunker, but the compound that he directed the Nazi troops from. Fans would write to him, and he'd have his autographed picture and send it to him. I don't know, man. Look, we've gone way too far in how we treat the enemy now, right? Everybody is the most dangerous man alive, and they have to be kept indefinitely forever. But there's some chance we weren't harsh enough back then. I can't believe that guy was out for 60 years just having a grand old time.